You're in the place where mysteries and the missing meet, where conspiracies lurk around every corner. Welcome to the Deep, Dark Truth.
Welcome back to the Deep Dark Truth. I'm Mo.
I'm Chip.
And I'm Mikey.
Today we are finally covering a highly requested case, and that is the case of the Westfield Watcher. But before we get started, we've taken a peek at our analytics, and we know that 70% of you are not subscribed. You're listening, but you're not subscribed, and that means you have to come look for us, which is boring and time-consuming. So take a second and hit that subscribe button so your next episode will automatically download. And make sure you follow us on Twitter, where you will find some updates for some last-minute shows. We did a Get Vocal show a while back that was very last-minute appearances on other people's shows, and then you'll know what we're up to.
1, why aren't you subscribed? You're making more work for yourself. 2, why do you think we mentioned this on the Watcher episode? It wasn't the analytics.
We have somebody watching, allegedly.
Oh my god.
If we say allegedly, it's not illegal. We don't have anyone watching you. See, that's what I said. You can quote me on that, just because my tone was suspicious.
So we are going to jump right into this case, which Mikey knows nothing about, which makes me very excited.
This is the case with most cases.
I mean, yeah, but I feel like this one, first of all, it's recent. Second of all, it's very, spooky notorious. You don't even have to be into, true crime cases or unsolved mysteries necessarily to have heard about this. But I do think that it's still from those same type of content creators a lot of times, so it makes sense that you might not have heard of it.
I'm excited. Let's do this.
Let's do it. So in June 2014, Derek and Maria Broaddus started the process of moving into their new home at 657 Boulevard in Westfield, New Jersey. That very same year, Westfield was named in the top 100 safest towns in America. Right. I'm sure that that's exactly what happened. Somebody's like, safest town. A perfect, idyllic place for the Broadduses to raise their 5, 8, and 10-year-old children. Their new home, built in 1905, was a spacious 3,920 square foot home with 6 bedrooms and 3.5 bathrooms that they had purchased for $1.3 million.
Jesus Christ.
I'll take it.
That is a big fucking house.
I'll take it.
3 kids? You don't even need that much space with 3 kids.
Let's go.
12 dogs,
kids,
maybe.
Polyamorous commune. Let's go.
Did someone say polyamorous commune?
Yes, I did. That's what I'm
Sign
here
me the
for.
fuck up.
Not in New Jersey.
Okay, wherever. Just a 6-bedroom, 3.5 bath sounds nice. That's all I have to say.
So the boulevard was wide and tree-lined and had a certain notoriety to it in an already affluent area. 657 itself was something of the crown jewel of the street. Before fully moving in, though, they had started renovations on the house, like a lot of people do, so that they're not moving around their furniture and things once they're already in the home.
Right.
Some of these renovations were things like painting and up to larger projects. But painting is what Derek was doing one night in June before checking his mail. In the mailbox, he found an envelope with no return address addressed to the new owners. This is what that letter said. In part, I'm going to guess that some parts of this letter were not released because there are other letters that haven't been fully released in their entirety, which we'll get into. But I'm sure that there's some things that have been held back just from the police perspective. Dear new neighbor at 657 Boulevard, allow me to welcome you to the neighborhood. How did you end up here? Did 657 Boulevard call to you with its force within? 657 Boulevard has been the subject of my family for decades now, and as it approaches its 110th birthday, I have been put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming. My grandfather watched the house in the 1920s, and my father watched in the 1960s. It is now my time. Do you know the history of the house? Do you know what lies within the walls of 657 Boulevard? Why are you here? I will find out. I see already that you have flooded 657 Boulevard with contractors so that you can destroy the house as it was supposed to be. Tisk, 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 bad move. You don't want to make 657 Boulevard unhappy. You have children. I've seen them. So far, I think there are 3 that I have counted. Are more on the way? Do you need to fill the house with the young blood I requested? Better for me. Was your old house too small for the growing family, or was it greed to bring me your children? Once I know their names, I will call to them and draw them too. Who am I? There are hundreds and hundreds of cars that drive by 657 Boulevard each day. Maybe I'm in one. Look out at all the windows you can see from 657 Boulevard. Maybe I am in one. Look out any of the windows in 657 Boulevard at all the people who stroll by each day. Maybe I am one. Welcome, my friends, welcome. Let the party begin. Signed, The Watcher.
What?
First of all, no fucking city.
No, absolutely not. You're kidding me, right? He's just painting and feeling his vibe, and this is the email he gets sent?
Okay, but be honest, if, like, I moved in next door to you, or, like, a neighborhood away from you, you would do this to me.
That's my first thought.
Yes, of course I would, because you're you and I'm me.
Exactly.
And that's what our relationship is.
I would do it to you, too.
Yeah, exactly. I hope so. Otherwise, what really is our friendship? A lie. It's a lie.
If either of you did this to me, I'd kill you.
We would both do it to you together.
And separately, and there'd be 3 letters in your mailbox waiting for you.
So obviously, the bizarre letter was enough to unsettle Derek, who called the police. Applause for Derek, everyone, that he actually called the police. He got...
Yeah, because usually in these stories, like, the first initial thing to do is just not...
Those damn kids.
Right. So he got a letter... No. He read the letter, he called the police. Reportedly, upon reading the letter, the responding police officer said, "What the fuck?" Which, save my dude. You have to think, too, this is like an affluent area. It is a idyllic, middle-class neighborhood. I would hope that the police officer would be like, no, what the fuck? Why? Why is this happening? So all of the neighbors were now suspects.
What's the shit about the children and the new blood? And
do you think I have an answer for you? There are no answers.
Yeah, you wrote it. I want to know.
Okay, FYI for the rest of the show. I have no answers for you, probably.
The house is gorgeous.
And then suddenly it's not.
I mean, I would put an outside balcony on the back, but that's just me.
You can obviously Google 657 Boulevard, but also there will be a link in the link tree to our sources, and there will also be a picture contained there. So all of the neighbors were now suspects, which means that the police department didn't want the Broadduses to share the contents of that letter with anyone, but most especially with her neighbors.
Where is this physical letter now?
He gave it to the police. I think the police gave it back to him, but we're going to touch on that later. I can't tell you with certainty, but I will tell you that... No, I'm not going to tell you anything. I lied.
Okay. Go on.
So this was obviously not the friendly neighborhood welcome that they had hoped for, right?
No, I've got my fingers crossed for stalker letters in my mailbox.
So Derek went back home, since they hadn't moved into the Boulevard home yet, since they were still doing renovations, and he discussed what happened with his wife. Another round of applause for Derek for common sense, telling his wife.
I'm gonna keep this secret to not scare her.
Yeah.
Then she gets murdered.
Yeah, for real. No. The beginning is very, like, that, yes, that's what you do. Good job, Derek. So together, they made the decision to contact the previous owners because the Watcher alluded that they had been watching the home for some time and their family had watching it previously to that. The previous owners of 657 Boulevard were named the Woods, and the Woods claimed that throughout their long history, which was 23 years, with the house they had never had any inclination that anyone was watching them, but that right before they moved out, they had received a letter from the Watcher. While they thought the letter was strange, they believed it to be a prank directed towards them rather than any kind of genuine threat, and they threw the letter away. Nevertheless, they did talk to the police about the incident after being contacted by Derek and Maria and realizing that this wasn't just a one-off sort of thing. Later, their lawyer, Richard J. Kaplow, would say that the letter was, quote, non-threatening and made, quote, no claim of any possession of the house in the way that the Watcher did in the letter to the Broadduses. It was also reported that the letter thanked them for taking care of the house.
What?
Obviously, this is going off of what they remember, but it seems as though it was like, oh, thank you so much for taking such great care of the house when you had it.
Oh, this was to the previous owners, not to him. Okay, gotcha. This makes sense.
And they got it right before they moved out. So to say that Derek and Maria were unhappy that they hadn't been informed about the original letter from the Westfield Watcher would be an absolute understatement. They were paranoid of the house and their neighbors, and they felt the need to constantly be aware of their surroundings, but especially where their children were concerned. What was supposed to be their dream home no longer felt safe, but the Westfield Watcher was not done with them yet.
It's only begun.
The police, obviously, at this point are involved. So during their investigation, they find that the first letter was sent on June 4th and was processed 40 minutes away from Westerfield in Kearney. But on the 4th, the sale had not yet been made public, and a for sale sign had never graced the front yard of 657 Boulevard.
So they had to have known.
Data. Very interesting data.
Yes. So a second letter from the Watcher arrived a few weeks after the first. This time, the Watcher had learned the names of the children and seemed to know which child was which. Not something that could have been learned from stealing their mail, for example. They also referenced many things that had been happening at the home, including construction workers, a dumpster that had been rented, some of the children's favorite play activities, such as painting. And the intimate details contained in the letter proved that the Watcher had begun keeping surveillance of the property, if they hadn't been already.
Yikes.
I mean, this could be a family friend fucking around with them, but like, dude. At what point is that just not funny anymore?
Exactly. So there's actually 4 letters. The second through the 4th letters have never been published in their entirety, to my knowledge, but rather published in excerpts with a few different sources. You can find all of those sources, again, in our link tree, but here are some creepy highlights from the 2nd through 4th letters. We'll start with the 2nd letter. Have they found what is hidden in the walls yet? In time, they will, in reference to all of the construction personnel that had been working on the property. I am pleased to know the names of the young blood you have brought to me. You certainly say their names often, which implies that the couple, being terrified to let their children out of their sight and calling after them while at the home, ended up being the very thing that gave the Watcher more ammunition to learn the children's names. Will the young blood play in the basement, or are they too afraid to go down there alone? I would be very afraid if I were them. It is far away from the rest of the house. If you were upstairs, you would never hear them scream. Which is comforting, really. Just very comforting. I feel so warm and fuzzy. I vote to burn down the house. The house is crying from all of the pain that it is going through. You have changed it and made it so fancy. You're stealing its history.
It's just from the phrase, the young blood, too. You've made it so
These
fancy.
These are highlights, I told you.
Just say it.
You have changed it and made it so fancy. You're stealing its history. It cries for the past and what used to be in a time when I roamed its walls. The 1960s were a good time for 657 Boulevard, when I ran from room to room, imagining the life with the rich occupants there. The house was full of life and young blood. Then it got old, and so did my father, but he kept watching until the day he died. and now I watch and wait for the day when the young blood would be mine again. So in that excerpt, you can see that the Watcher directly references him being in the house at some point, but I don't think that we can trust him, right? I don't think, like, Psycho Stalker is really, like, a reliable narrator. It could just be, it could be some type of red herring. It could be this writer trying to point to somebody else.
It just makes it creepier just to say it.
Right.
Like, it enhances the creepiness, and if it doesn't give, like, a specific instance in the house, like, I remember when I knocked into the wall that was this, that, and the other thing.
Right. Not like the one before, where it's, like, not afraid to play in the basement. Like, you have to be watching to realize and note something like that.
So here are some from the last letter. I watched as you watched from the dark house in an attempt to find me. Telescopes and binoculars are wonderful inventions.
Wow.
You wonder who the Watcher is? Turn around, idiots. Which is...
That's a good moment in a movie.
It is.
About this.
The last letter is also addressed to the vile and spiteful Derek and his wench of a wife, Maria. Just a fantastic working relationship, I would say these people have. So the second letter also asks which rooms would be occupied by which family members, and said that the writer wants to know in an effort to plan better, and claims that the Woods family was involved to some extent. Quote, the Woods family turned it over to you. It was their time to move on and kindly sold it when I asked them to, which in my opinion probably really pissed them off. First, the Woods did inform them about the first letter, and now the Watcher is claiming that the only reason that the Woods sold the house to begin with is because the Watcher asked them to.
But that feels like the sort of language of, like, I asked the universe, the house is angry with you, like...
Yeah, it could be
the house asked them to sell it, not that I literally asked them to sell it to you,
Also, I try not to slip up and call the Watcher he, because I think the male persona that the letter writer is putting forward could be a misdirection, but equally...
Statistics.
Yeah, equally statistics, and it seems like the Watcher position is patriarchal in some way, my father and his father before him type of thing.
Yeah,
so it kind of implies that the letter writer is a man.
Right.
Also, the family hired a forensic linguist at one point that said that the wording of some of the things that are said in the letters are very old-fashioned, and the person that wrote it is probably past 50 years old.
I just pictured that it was an older man.
What are your feelings so far, knowing a little bit about the letters, knowing a little bit about the family?
I'm not pissed at the previous family, the Woods. Like, I wouldn't keep that letter if it didn't have specific threatening language the way the first new one did. If it was just like... La la la, thanks for taking care of the house. It would be creepy, but not like, this is alarming.
So, a lot of states don't have disclosure laws. New Jersey is one of those states. You don't have to disclose if the house is, like, rumored to be haunted, or if someone died in the house.
Arizona, you do. Huh, that's interesting.
In Michigan, you don't.
Right. But they do have to disclose, like, material things, like latent, issues with the house, things like that. And you can't conceal anything, but you don't have to say, oh, hey, there's a rumor that a ghost lives in this house, or I'm pretty sure that this house is haunted.
I get the feeling that whoever's writing the letters wants to include the Woods and make the connection in order to get those parties agitated at one another and just cause more of a storm and get away from what's really going on.
We are going to talk about some theories in just a second. But first, here is a promo from our friend Jules over at Riddle Me That.
Hi, I'm Jules from Riddle Me That True Crime. I have a passion for all things crime and psychology, and I have a PhD in transpersonal counseling, so I love research and I like to do deep dives into cases. I recently did a 3-part series on the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. I promise you, this is coverage that you haven't heard anywhere else. I also do cases that are lesser known, such as the case of Keith Warren, who in 1986 was found hanging from a tree in Silver Spring, Maryland. His death was classified as a suicide, but things don't add up in the case. Keith was found wearing clothes that weren't his. The 911 caller said that someone had committed suicide in her boyfriend's basement, and when emergency services arrived, the body was in the woods and not in the basement. Keith's mother, Mary, would receive a manila envelope that would call the suicide conclusion by police into question. There were copies of police photos and a note that predicted the death of Keith's friend, Mark Finley. Mark Finley calls Mary to unburden himself, but he would never get the chance. Before he gets a chance to meet up with Mary, he is killed in a freak accident, though some believe it was murder. 2020 is a strange year, and it is comforting to have a favorite podcast to keep you company. I would love to be that podcast. Subscribe to Riddle Me That True Crime on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever you get your podcasts.
And we're back. Derek obviously went into full-on conspiracy mode, which I think all of us, at least, can agree.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
we would. And if you listen to this podcast, we assume that at some point in your life you have made a conspiracy board.
Yeah,
I can't really imagine a person who, in this situation, doesn't go into conspiracy mode. Yeah. Like, what's the other reaction here besides just moving?
The second letter would have quit my job.
I think the other reaction is like, damn kids. Well, until the second. I think that might be the response for the first letter. The second letter,
when they have the names and know which is which.
And it references their daughter painting on an easel on the front porch, which we will talk about in a second.
Why did you set your kid out on the front porch?
In fact, at one point when meeting with a reporter, Derek showed them a map of the neighborhood with the sight lines to and from the house. And he claimed that only one of those families had been there long enough to potentially be the Watcher. He set up cameras, he hired private investigators, one of which was a retired FBI agent, and he eventually hired a security company to find handwriting matches and a forensic linguist to inspect the letters, and who knows what else. Those are just the things that I found in a handful of articles, but I doubt that he has disclosed everything he has tried to do in order to catch the Westfield Watcher. So I want to take a second to point out that nearly all of Derek's theories hinge on the fact that he is assuming everything the Watcher said was true, which I highly doubt.
I was about to ask that, because he's like, they've been here long enough to potentially been the Watcher. Who says that his grandfather was actually watching this house in the 1920s?
Right, it could even be a small misdirect, like they could live a few blocks away from the house, where the house might not have been visible, but they walk past there. They could have lied about their family line watching the house to make it sound more threatening and spooky and sinister, and like they're part of something bigger than themselves. It could be like a delusion. It could be someone that they know personally, and this is all in an effort to terrorize them, or it started as a prank, and then it went way too far, and then they were like, I don't know what to do now. I guess I'll send another letter, which is a horrible reaction. But it could be somebody that he fired them or had something to do with them being fired from their job, and they have some kind of vendetta against the family for some reason. Who knows?
It also could just be someone who's sick.
It very much could be, which is one of
somebody mentally ill.
Derek's theories. So the family that had caught the interest of Derek was his next-door neighbors, the Langfords, and this was for a few different reasons. The second letter had referenced their daughter painting on an easel on the porch, but the porch was hidden by shrubbery from the street, which to Derek indicated that the view had come from a neighbor on either side of his property. Also, the Langfords had lived there long enough, in his opinion, to have a history of watching the house. The Woods had never put a for sale sign in the yard, but it was possible that their neighbors had been privy to the Woods moving through word of mouth or through watching the Woods pack up to leave. Though how the Watcher came upon their names specifically, since nothing had been, no deed or transfer of title or anything had happened, that is still a mystery.
Is that the first letter? Because didn't it not have their names in the first letter?
You're right. The first letter did not say their names, only the second letter did. It just said, Dear Newest Neighbor. For some reason, I thought that the envelope said to the new owners, but...
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. That's possible that, they didn't learn it until after they moved in, and they just knew that someone was going to be moving into the Woods' home.
Once it's bought, then that does go on the government paperwork somewhere. There's a website where you can look it up. Who owns this property?
Yeah, but that also, the second letter is where they knew the names and ages and such of the children. And, very specific details about things that were in the yard.
Okay, then they know everything at that point. They don't need to be Googling.
Which would be easy to know if you're a next-door neighbor. Which makes sense that he would think that it was next-door neighbor on either side. Because you can learn all that from that.
Also, they do have a lot of people working on their house. So, I mean, if they hired somebody that works in that area and also lives in the neighborhood, I don't know. But let's continue on with the list of things that he thought pointed to the Langfords. So the father of the family had passed 12 years previously, which would align with the Watcher statement that he had been at the mantle for, quote, the better part of 2 decades. And his adult son did still live in the home with his mother. That son's name was Michael Langford, and he was questioned and denied involvement. And since there was no proof, the case was at a dead end. Though he had been diagnosed with schizophrenia as a young man, the neighbors around 657 who had known him for years did not think him capable of doing such a thing.
I don't like this villainization of schizophrenia.
Me either, and wait.
Oh no.
No, you'll feel vindicated.
Oh, good.
Later, DNA was uncovered from one of the letters, and that DNA turned out to be female. That turned suspicion onto Michael's sister Abby, but she was later ruled out through DNA, and that DNA ended up ruling out the entire family. The Langfords were vindicated, but the Broadduses were still skeptical.
Fuck off, Derek.
So I'm guessing that when they did her DNA, they were like, not only is it not her DNA, but it's not somebody that's her father or her brother or her child.
With a very reasonable margin of error, we know this person is not a close relative.
Exactly.
Right. What kind of DNA was it? Skin cells? Or...
It didn't say. I know that it didn't say, like, prints or anything, so I don't think it was skin cells, because I think that would have been from, like, a partial print or something that some kind of latent print.
It might have been saliva, maybe, with licking the envelope?
Oh, from licking the envelope? It very well could be that. I didn't find anything specific, but I would guess that you're probably right.
Why would you be that stupid if you're the Watcher?
I don't know. Especially when you could just use, like, a glove and water. Anybody that's had to lick a lot of envelopes, like hundreds of envelopes, knows that you use your finger in water.
They have little spongy devices specifically for it.
Right, but it also could have, like, based on what actual part of DNA it was, it could have been, like, a carrier, a male carrier, or...
That's very true.
You know.
I hope that they would check that it would be from underneath the seal of the envelope.
Right, well, that's why I'd want to know, like, what kind of DNA it was. Is it blood? Is it saliva? Is it sweat? You know what I mean? Like.
Okay, you call the police and figure that out. I'm gonna keep going.
Okay.
It was sperm.
I'll be right back.
So, Maria and Derek refused to move into this house. They had already sold their previous home, though. So as a result, they ended up moving into Maria's parents until they could figure out how to handle the situation. Maria had grown up in the neighborhood and had came back to raise her children there. After months of hoping that the Watcher would be discovered to no avail, they decided that they would sell the home. 657 had become a stress on their lives and was taking a toll on them emotionally as well as in their marriage, as the stress had manifested into arguments.
Question about the timeline. Like, how long does this...
I can find a very specific reference, but it seems it's at least a few months. Like, they were hoping that something would happen, and then when nothing did happen, they were like, okay, we're going to sell the house.
Because they didn't move in there, but they were hanging out there enough that the kids were, painting on the porch, da-da-da-da-da.
After the first letter, they brought it to the police, and I think they thought it was going to be a one-off thing, or the person would be caught right away. So they were continuing the renovations on the house. And I think that they just weren't in a position to, have their kids being watched somewhere else all the time.
So they were just, at the house fixing it up, and you bring the kids along and you set them up with a toy. Okay.
Right. The front porch is, obviously, it's covered, and so it's close to the house. So I'm thinking that it was okay, well, we're going to be working on the porch or, the side of the house or outside planting flowers. So you go right there where I can see you, or where I can see you from the window.
Right.
So even though Maria and Derek had decided to sell the home, they had also decided they couldn't in good conscience sell the home without disclosing the letters. As a result, the offers that were coming in were well below the value of the home, and they didn't feel like their financial situation could take the loss, and so they decided to file a suit against the Woods for not disclosing.
This is not, don't like this blaming of the Woods, because you don't, even when you do have disclosure laws, you don't disclose, oh, my kid sneezed in that bedroom and might have had the COVID 10 years ago.
Yeah.
That lawsuit was thrown out, but in the lawsuit, they basically say that the letters that they got from the Watcher claimed ownership over the property and were threatening, and if the letter that the Woods got was threatening, they should have disclosed it because they were basically putting the family in danger.
Right.
Which is kind of fair.
I agree.
But I really don't think the Woods letter was as scary, I guess, as the letter that they received. It seems like the Watcher was more like, thank you so much for taking care of the house. And that seems really odd because of what we know. So I live in a place that has a lot of older neighbors, and those older neighbors say things like, oh, so-and-so really keeps up their house. They're really they care about their value of their home. And so they care about what other people's yards look like, when other people are mowing their lawn, what kind of flowers they're planting, what, if they're getting new driveway installed, it better be X, Y, or Z. It better not be a tar driveway, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really not that strange, I feel like, from their perspective, to get a letter from the Watcher. It's weird that it's from the Watcher. But, if it wasn't signed the Watcher and was just signed your neighbors, thanks so much for keeping up with your house. You've been such a great neighbor for all these years. They might have been wow, this person's a weirdo. This was a weird way to put it, but sure. Yeah.
In that sort of context, yes, this would only raise weirdo suspicions, not murder suspicions.
Right?
I mean, sign the Watcher, that makes it that is an immediate red flag to me. I would have held on to the letter. Sorry, but I would have.
I would have too. If anything, I would have been look at this weird ass letter I got and showed it to everybody. But
I wouldn't have showed it to the new owner. That's for
I wouldn't have showed it to the new owner either. I am not disclosing my haunted house. No way.
It has a tiny evil door.
Tiny evil demon door is your problem now.
That's kind of your problem, though.
Yeah, that's not my problem.
I've never actually felt any bad energy or juju or vibe from that door.
It's just Chip.
I've slept in that room, so...
Yes. Don't listen to Chip.
I've slept in that room plenty. I've probably slept in that room more than you have.
Chip has slept in that room more than anybody except for either one of my parents. Otherwise, Chip, the winner.
Third place.
But I also don't trust his, source of what is good and what is bad. I don't at all. So I'm going with me on this side. It's not creepy.
Let's talk about some other theories and other creepy information. Let's just have a chat. So the original investigation wasn't very thorough, and the Broadduses eventually learned that they had not been the only ones to receive a letter from the Watcher. That family had lived in their house for a number of years, and while they found the letter strange, they had also thrown the letter away which leads us right into some of these other theories.
Wait, what?
Lord. So there's
Who's this other family? Where did they come from?
them?
What house were they in?
Yeah, the same house?
So they were not from the same house. They were somewhere on the block. They had received a letter from the Watcher. It was not detailed exactly what was in the letter. I'm guessing that it's because nobody knew about that letter, so it didn't get as much publicity. And so it's probably considered guilty knowledge, whatever was in that letter. I will continue to try and look for it so I can put it in the sources. But over the last 2 weeks, I have not found it.
The mystery family give it to the police?
No, they threw it away. Just
That's
like
my
the Woods
point.
did.
That's my point. If you get a letter sent to you and it's just gibberish, doesn't make sense, but it's signed the Watcher. The Watcher. Doesn't it, I don't know. I wouldn't throw that letter away. It would be posted on my Facebook, my live journal. It'd be tweeted.
You have a live
Instagram.
journal? What year is it in
I'm
this
kidding.
scenario?
It was a joke.
All right, first listener that can find Mikey's current
Oh
live
my
journal.
god, no, it's not current.
It's a free sticker?
Don't even look for it. It's not current. It's terrible. It's probably still got the weirdest music on it. I don't even know. But anyhow, yeah, I don't know. I would save the letter. I would give it to the police. It would be posted on social media.
I was just chatting about this. I was telling my mom about it. And chain letters in the mail used to be pretty common. Which, if I got a letter in the mail, like a chain letter in the mail, I would think it was the creepiest
But
thing.
it's not signed
Right.
the Watcher.
It doesn't matter. It's like, if you don't forward this to 8 people, I'll murder your family. It's just as bad. It's just not signed the Watcher. So who knows what kind of weird letters these people have got throughout their life. I'm curious.
Hey, older listeners, tell us about the weird spam you received in the physical mail.
For real. Prior to the online Nigerian print scams, there was tons of scams through the mail. So, other theories. The neighbors behind the Broadduses had lawn chairs at the back of their property that were facing the house, which doesn't inherently sound suspicious, but I guess they were unusually close to the property line, and a painter in the home named Bill Woodward, who was working for the Broadduses, said that they saw a man sitting on one of those chairs looking at the property. This is what he had to say about the Broadduses. Quote, "They were so joyous about their new home, and then within days they were petrified. I'm a stranger, and Maria was crying and shaking in my arms." So a strange fact about that family that lived behind the Broadduses is that one of their children married a man who had grown up in the house, which goes back to that reference in letter number 2 about how in the 60s they had run free and all of these things through the halls of 657 Boulevard.
Which would make sense, but also I want to point out that in reference to the letters of seeing either side by side but not from the front of the house, you could see from the back of the house. But also the red herrings of I could be in the street or walking to throw you off thinking frontal when it's really behind.
Yeah, and I would argue that if your neighbors on either side of your property can see something on the side of your house, that a person walking down the street from far away will be able to probably see that easel on the porch.
Yeah.
You mean from the front? He said the hedges were in the front.
Yeah, but he said the hedges blocked the front but didn't block the sides. But when you're walking down the street, you have a clear view of the side of someone's house. If you're far enough away.
It depends. I mean, if I'm looking at it as a wide lane, like you described, I think that was a point of reference for a reason that you wouldn't be able to see the front because the hedges were so tall.
So everyone take a look at the picture. Let us know what you think. Do you think you would be able to see it coming from down the street? I think the hedges aren't very high.
Oh,
no, I think this hedge defense is completely illegitimate based on that picture.
You're right. Based on that picture, it's completely illegitimate.
Maybe the hedges were higher at the time, and maybe they kept them higher and didn't trim them.
But what porch is he talking about? Is he talking about the screened-in porch to the right side or the front porch?
was under the impression that they were talking about the front porch.
But why would you set... I don't know. I would believe that you would do it in the screened-in side, wouldn't you?
Yeah, but I think it depends on where the parents were doing, like, work on the property that day to be able to keep their daughter in their line of sight.
Those hedges don't even block the porch.
Yeah, so I have a front bush, and that bush gets really huge, and then we chop it, halfway down. So it could have been much higher at the time than it is now.
Yeah, that was a real estate picture, and then...
Right.
For sure.
Yeah.
Once the news of the Watcher started circulating, the neighbors all had a bit of a team meeting, we'll say.
A council meeting. A neighborhood meeting.
Right. And one of their theories was that Derek and Maria themselves had some degree of involvement in the letters. We're not saying this. This is not a thing that we are alleging. This is just what was reported by the neighbors. So there had been no history of the Watcher in the neighborhood before Derek and Maria were set to move in. And they speculated that they had got in over their head on the mortgage.
Bit off more than they could chew.
Or they were trying to get the house for a cheaper price. And once the Woods didn't respond to that first letter and the house closed,
They were just fucked.
That lawsuit could have been their plan, honestly.
I think the idea behind this theory is that they expected the Woods to disclose this letter after it had been sent, and when they didn't, it was too late for them to back out of the closing of the property.
You can't just be like, hey, did you receive any weird letters recently?
Exactly.
And they would have known where to send the letter to the Woodses, the other neighborhood to send the letter to, and all the details that were described in all the letters because they are living it there. It's them. It's an interesting theory.
It's just a theory, but it will pop back up again in a little bit. So the neighbors also had questions about why the family continued to make upgrades to the property that they couldn't live in. So this later led Derek, all of the different rumors circulating in the neighborhood and people pointing fingers at him and Maria, to send a series of anonymous notes himself, which he was confronted about during an interview. Those letters were sent to a whole bunch of neighbors, and they were specifically ones that had been vocal in saying that Derek and Maria were scam artists, and the letter basically just said that they were wrong about the Broadduses and that there was unchecked mental illness in the community that the community was ignoring.
Eric, I hate you.
So that letter kind of makes you think, okay, well, is this Derek being fed up after having 4 different letters and nobody's listening to them? He feels like his neighbors are now turning against him, but he's a victim. And so he gets mad and is just like, oh, well, I'm just going to send you an anonymous letter and see how you like it.
I mean, protection of your family can drive you to do crazy things. Like, at what does harassment become too much and you have to, like, take matters into your own hands?
The reporter that confronted Derek did say that the letters seemed the same type of unhinged as the Watcher's letters, but just in a different way, which led me to believe, since I obviously haven't read this letter or any part of it, really, it led me to believe that it's not the same speaker, because it sounds like it's different enough. Like, he tried to mimic the Watcher's, like, scary, sinister persona, but, like, just couldn't nail it. And just ended up sounding super defensive, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that might, like, lead some people to believe that, okay, that helps affirm this theory, possibly a presumption of guilt where Derek and Maria are concerned, but the female DNA was also checked against Maria's that had been on one of the previous Watcher letters, and that DNA was not Maria's either.
Yeah, interesting.
So if he somehow had something to do with it, that DNA did not belong to his wife.
But what about his mother?
Daughter? One of the daughters?
The daughter's 10, and it would be Maria's daughter, so they would know that it was some kind of relative of her.
So this happened in...
So this happened in 2014. The last letter, when it arrived, the fourth letter, actually the renter was living there at the time, and a renter, when Derek came out to do something for the property, just like landlordy maintenance things, the renter gave the letter to Derek. And so they rented the house. They did eventually sell the house. The house was finally sold in 2019, but it was sold for only $959,000.
Wow.
In comparison to the $1.3 million.
Plus all the renovations and stuff they put into it.
Plus all of the renovations. I still do not understand why they continued to renovate the house. I don't know if they wanted to, like, refinance eventually, or if they were hoping with the lawsuit that they would be able to somehow do, like, the difference between what the house is actually worth and what the market value of the house was now, with all this spooky stuff attached to it. I have no idea.
Right.
It makes no sense to me.
I just want to know what the renovations were, and, like, could they not back out on it, like, properly once it was started? Like,
possibly they had already signed contracts with these renovators, and it was like, okay, either we're going to lose this giant amount of deposit that we already paid the renovators, because that's usually how it works in construction, right? You're paying like 50% up front, and then 50% when the job is completed, and X amount of it is completely non-refundable. Maybe some of these things were already started, and they're like, well, we're not going to leave it half finished. That would be ridiculous, and it's going to degrade the value of the home even further. Who knows? Mm-hmm. Not us. So in December of 2018, right before they sold the house, the rights to the family story was secured by Netflix. So they made up for the amount of money they lost in the house through the Netflix deal.
And then some.
And then some. I'm not sure exactly how much Netflix paid, but I do know that it was 7 figures, and that the bidding war was intense and included Universal for Jason Blum, Paramount for J.J. Abrams' Bad Robot production company, Amazon for producer Michael Sugar, and Fox for Peter Chernin. So it was some pretty decent names in there trying to get their hands on these rights. I'm actually really glad that Netflix is the one that secured the rights, honestly, after some of their more recent things, like The Haunting of Hill House. So what do you guys think? I think it's somebody that they know.
I want to believe in my heart of hearts that they're just kind of terrible people, and I think they did something wrong to somebody.
I really, really, really think that that's what it is. I don't know if it's a jealousy thing, if it's a revenge thing, but the fact that the house never had a for sale sign in the yard, either it has to be somebody that the Woods told or somebody that the Broaddus's told that they were moving into that house specifically.
But it's 2014 and it's social media. I think anybody can find out from a simple tweet, Facebook post, Instagram post that somebody's selling their house or somebody's moving or somebody's packing or something like.
True, but I think that there's a certain level of terrorizing in the letter that you don't do to strangers. That
I
level
agree. I don't think it's from a stranger, but I think it's somebody they know.
Yeah.
I 100% honestly think it's somebody they know. And I think it was revenge or jealousy or something. You know what I'm going to go with? The lover theory. It's a past ex
Derek's lover
of one of them, or somebody who like they cheated on and never told them, and I don't know.
Yeah, I wish I knew a little bit more about them personally, because it just really feels like a revenge vendetta thing to me. It seems very shady and like they're trying to instill fear. I think bringing the kids' names into it and trying to terrify them is like a cut above the rest. Talking about don't let the kids play in the basement, like you'll never hear them scream. Like
I could murder you at any moment.
Way beyond somebody that's obsessed with the house.
Yeah, I think it's somebody they know, or it's the neighbor behind them. Final answer. Because why are there chairs on the base property line?
Right? Why would you put them all the way towards the property line? There's nothing to look at except for your neighbor's backyard. It's so weird.
And married somebody that grew up in the house. That's kind of a bizarre coincidence.
Yeah, I'd really be interested to know if the daughter that married the son or whoever that had grown up in the house, if her DNA matches.
Right. Can we match that?
But even then, what is the motive? What is the motive? If it's not revenge and it's not somebody that they know, why would they be so aggressive with it? And even if they just had creepy stuff like the walls, they didn't have to bring up the kids' names.
I mean, anything, like any type of cultist behavior can be passed down from generations to generations. Like this, that could be a real thing. They're obsessed with the house. That's why the chairs are on the property line. That's why they look at it so much. Like, it can be ingrained in the nature of passing down this belief or this thing that this is something bigger.
Chip, what are your thoughts?
I don't think it's any direct neighbors.
Married the guy that grew up in the house, that's a coincidence. I don't know.
I mean, it's kind of like a cute I married my neighbor story.
Yeah. And we're rich people, and we all only marry rich people we know from our neighborhoods.
The thing that I think is the most damning is the fact that nothing had ever happened until right before they moved in. And that tells me that somebody has a vendetta against them.
Yeah, I think it would be someone who they know, but if I wanted to start stalking a house, it would absolutely be when it switches owners. Because then I get to be like, ooh, fresh blood, you don't have to wonder why you've lived here for 20 years without me saying anything.
Yeah.
That's true. Well, send us all of your theories. Send them to us on Twitter, and I'll answer you right away. Send them by email, and I'll answer you soon. Send them other places, and we'll see what happens. You can find the links to all of those socials, our Patreon, our merch, in the link tree down below. For September, our special Patreon episode is going to be about dumb criminals. So head on over to our Patreon if that's something that you're interested in listening to.
Do you like criminals? Do you like it more when they're dumb?
Stupid. Just stupid.
If you're looking for the fall in love serial killers thing, this one is not for you.
Damn it.
Until next time, I'm Mo.
I'm Chip.
And I'm Mikey.
Bye.
You just listened to the Deep Dark Truth Podcast. See you next time. And remember, your local cryptids want to meet you.